Let's talk just a little bit about inflation. I mean, I've heard you explain that we are starting to see some inflation as a function of the tariffs, but because people saw this coming, there was inventories that were built up. There was a big expenditure, and that takes a while to work its way through the system, almost like a snake eating a rat, as it were. But once that passes, which we are sort of on the verge of that, we're going to start to see increasing inflation in the coming months. And that's regardless of what happens on August 1st.
Yes. So let me just try and create a little bit of structure for the audience so that I know not everyone wants to think like they're in an Econ 101 class, but that's how I teach. So when import taxes go up, one of three things has to happen. Actually, one of four things. So either the foreign countries reduce the price they send stuff to the United States. That's what Trump bet would happen. And to be absolutely clear about that, that has not happened. Import prices are literally unchanged. So we've had roughly a 10% tariff in place since April. If Trump were right, import prices would have fallen 10%. If you look at import prices excluding oil, because oil's not tariffed, they're exactly flat. So foreign countries are wearing none of it. So that then means the only two other places the tax goes, and it has to be paid by someone, right? So they're going to be paid by, let's say Best Buy imports a washing machine from Korea. It's either going to be paid by Best Buy or Best Buy is going to jack up their prices, in which case it's paid by you. At this point, we're not seeing a lot of movement in consumer prices. We're seeing a little bit, but not a lot. So what that tells us is that Best Buy is bearing it. Now, just to be crystal clear about that, Best Buy is an American company. So the costs are being borne by Americans. They're being paid for by yours and my 401k rather than at the grocery store, at the checkout. Now, why is it that that's happening? That's a fairly standard short-run thing, which is whenever your costs go up and down a lot, businesses try and keep their prices pretty stable. And so it's only when they're confident that prices are up and they're going to stay high that they'll go ahead and pass on the price rises. So one that says don't expect Best Buy to continue to be happy about lower profits. And we saw earnings reports from General Motors and other big companies saying their profitability is down. But the other part of this is actually what you said, which is the Trump tariffs went on in April and everyone's like, well, why aren't we seeing it in prices yet? Well, they didn't apply to the goods that were already on boats. And it takes a month for a new good to get on the boat and get to the United States. So that brings us to May. Then it has to get off the boat and through customs. That's a couple of weeks. And then it has to get on the truck and into the storeroom. That's another couple of weeks. And then once those goods get to the storeroom, it turns out the storeroom's pretty crowded right now because a lot of companies knew tariffs were coming, so they stocked up. So these goods are only just getting to the shelves now, but the most recent price data we have is from last month. And so that's the very simple logic of why no one should ever have expected an effect on prices right now. The other part of this is people will say, hey, for instance, they'll say to me, Justin, you've been screaming tariffs are inflationary this whole time, but we haven't seen an inflationary breakout. And part of the answer is Trump hasn't imposed most of the tariffs. Most of them are off until August 1st. It's no surprise that in June and July, we're not seeing the effects of August 1st tariffs yet. And so if he does go this next step, for sure and for certain, this will continue to raise prices. And then you'll ask me the question when, and the answer is by the end of the year, but not straight away.
So what happens when prices go up? And we've been talking about around the holidays, it's going to be a really major problem with like some of the trade wars with China and cheaper toys and things like that. That's where things could be felt. What happens if prices go up and Jerome Powell remains firm at the Fed with not lowering interest rates in response to that? You know, some of the turbulence you're seeing in the market that you've described has been when he's been like openly flirting with firing Jerome Powell, but he's largely been prevented from doing that. But in 2026, he'll be able to replace him legally. So like, how does the Fed play into all of this right now?
There's just so much to talk about. I apologize. And then I keep rambling in my responses. So Emma, I'm going to say the same thing I said to Sam a moment ago. Let me pick up some important parts, and the parts you want me to hit on, bring me back to. Okay.
Sure.
Let's talk about Powell, Trump, and the Fed, because to many audiences, Federal Reserve independence sounds like an obscure concept and maybe something we don't even like. Here's the very simple logic of it. We could either have presidents make decisions about monetary policy, raising and lowering interest rates, or have independent nerds do it. I think a standard democratic theory view would say, well, presidents are elected and nerds aren't, so maybe we should let presidents do it. The problem is presidents can't be trusted. Presidents make choices in presidents' own political interests. And so Trump has already said very clearly what he wants to do is take an economy and run it into overdrive, which at one level would be good. We'd make more stuff, but another level would spark inflation almost straight away. And so this is the same logic that says when I go to a party with a six-pack in my hand, I hand someone else my car keys because I know I'm going to get drunk enough, I'm going to make a really bad decision. And so what I want is someone else to make the decision for me. That's what central bank independence is. It's politicians understanding that politicians can't be trusted. And for the past 50 years, politicians have understood that. And as a result, we've had reasonably low inflation. Now, if there were ever a politician who should not be handed the car keys right now, it's probably the guy in the White House who's already said that what he wants to do is reduce interest rates to a degree that simply makes no sense whatsoever. That's the underlying story. Let me come back and actually tell you what I think this looks like in real life, because we've actually seen this movie before. In Turkey, a populist strongman, Erdogan, came to power. That populist strongman, like our populist strongman, really loves low interest rates. Ours because he's a real estate developer, Erdogan because he doesn't understand economics. Arguably, they both have that in common. Erdogan got frustrated with the Turkish central bank. And ultimately, what he did was, it was somewhat independent before, he appointed one of his loyalists, a yes man. That yes man said, all right, boss, you want low interest rates even though inflation is not only high but rising, and he kept interest rates low. And inflation went up, 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 up. And he kept interest rates low and they kept rising until inflation hit 86%. Now, you and I don't even know what it feels like to live in a world of 86%, but basically it causes 86% inflation, but basically it causes enormous dysfunction throughout society, let alone financial markets. You know, throughout society, you're running home to spend your money while it's still worth something. Financial markets cause a much broader meltdown. So we know what happens when a populist strongman who loves low interest rates appoints a loyalist. Things turn out very badly. And you might say, well, Justin, we're not Turkey. And the thing is, Turkey used to think Turkey wasn't Turkey. So I think this is, in fact, an utterly genuine risk.
And that risk is going to come to the fore in May. I mean, it looks like he's not going to fire Powell now. Powell, my understanding is basically waiting, and then the Fed has a dual mandate of low unemployment around, at least over the course of like 20, 30 years. I mean, 20 years ago, they were saying you could not have unemployment this low. It was physically impossible for the country to have unemployment this low. And inflation is around where their benchmark wants it to be. He's holding off on cutting rates because he's afraid of this tariff stuff is all in play.
Right.
Trump wants him to, but Trump is going to install, I mean, it could be his son for all we know at this point, to be or nominate for the chair of the Fed. And I would imagine we're going to see, following May, regardless of what the situation is, multiple rate cuts. Can the Fed, the body of the Fed itself, inhibit the chairman from doing this? Do you see indications that they would do that? Because I would imagine it's in Trump's interest to have rates cut as much as possible in June, July of 2026, so that the overheating of the economy is basically in place for the midterm elections, and then who knows what he's thinking after that. But what are the mechanics of that?
Great question. So look, when I talk to non-economists, I often think people aren't scared enough, so I try and light a fire under them. If we lose the independence of the central bank, we lose a very, very valuable economic institution and much of our economic future. I may have succeeded a little too much with you, Sam, because you seem terrified. So now let me tell you.
It's a lot of things, to be honest with you. But yeah,
Let me tell you the good news. First of all, it's not obvious Trump will appoint a charlatan. It's still possible. Let me give you a couple of thoughts there. First of all, whoever he appoints has to be Senate confirmed. And that's actually been a reasonable barrier in the past. Secondly, the first half of the first Trump administration, he actually appointed very reasonable people to the Fed. They're not the people you would appoint, but they're people I would be willing to vouch for their credentials and their way of thinking, if not their values. They're people who are technically sound and unwilling to take crazy political choices just because the boss says so. That was the first half of the Trump administration. The second half of the first Trump administration, he actually then tried to make two appointments that were genuine lunatics. Stephen Moore of the Heritage Foundation. Is he at Heritage? I forget where he is.
He was. I haven't seen much of him as of late, but he was a longtime Heritage Foundation guy and sort of a Arthur Laffer acolyte, I guess you could say.
And not only an intellectual lightweight, but intellectually dishonest. And it turns out he also doesn't pay his alimony. That's actually what did him in. And then Judy Shelton, who was a gold bug. And gold bugs are a whole different kind of dangerous and so far outside the mainstream of thinking that her views on the economy simply, most economists would say, don't make sense. So yes, is capable of charlatans as well, although in both cases, ultimately, Senate confirmation turned out to be the problem. Let me also tell you why I'm less worried about the next 2 years. Interest rate decisions are actually made by a committee. The committee is called the Federal Open Market Committee, and there are 12 members on it. And over the next, leading up to the midterms, I think Trump gets to make two appointments, one of which would be chair. If the chair is a lunatic, the other 11, I'm very confident, I know many of these people personally, will just not be led by a lunatic. And you cannot just raise and lower interest rates as the Fed chair without the committee say so. If he appoints two lunatics, they're still going to be out on their own. The more worrying things would be he could appoint someone who's not a lunatic, but actually quite smart and committed to similar goals that he had. And the chairman is basically the boss of the staff, and the staff are a really big part of these decisions because they're technical and difficult. The other thing you could do is you could launch on a pathway to take over the Fed with lunatics. That's not going to play out in the next 2 years. But it turns out the Federal Open Market Committee, that important committee, is the people appointed directly by Trump, plus the presidents of the regional Federal Reserve banks, which are a very bizarre, I could talk for a month about them, very bizarre institution, but you can only be appointed the president of a regional Fed if the Federal Reserve in Washington says yes. So if he takes over the 5 board of governors in Washington, then he would open the doorway to appointing more lunatics in the future. That's a much slower timeline, though. That's going to play out over, you'd start to see first steps in a few years and start to really be worried a few years after that.
That's encouraging. I mean, since you're in a mood to assuage me, the Genius Act, like how, as we start to see this whole package of the supposed stable coins and the crypto legislation that the Republicans are teeing up, and it seems the Democrats, or at least a sufficient number of them, are bought and paid for by the crypto industry, that they're okay with this. And maybe this is too broad of a question, but how many years until we hit the crypto version of 2008?
For the first time in our discussion today, I'm going to be brief. I have not seen a single use case for cryptocurrency apart from avoiding crime. So I don't see how our society is better with it. Equally, I don't see how our society suffers when it goes away. But it is, the fact that they've moved from trying to get libertarians to invest to getting working class mums and dads to be the ones holding the can when the whole thing blows up worries me enormously. So for any of your audience who are listening, my very strong advice is stay out. You might miss the up, but I promise you'll miss the down as well. Look, I might be wrong, but this is an industry that, as far as I can tell, does nothing.
Oh, no, I couldn't agree more. But what I'm concerned about is when the Treasury starts to support the stable coins, and when vanilla banking starts to get involved in this, like how much systemic risk what's the over under on how long it takes for this to become a systemic risk? Where I may not buy any Bitcoin or Trump coin or whatever it is, but if all of these institutions of our financial industry is sort of and we're responsible for saving it, how exposed are we? And we'll let you go in a moment. I know you got other things to do.
I gotta let you laugh at me. That was my phone. It was my therapist saying you're late.
I'm sorry.
Maybe this is a different kind of therapy, Sam.
We're all going to need it. We're all
exactly.
going to need it after this.
Yes. The key issue is when people lose money, if something teeters in crypto land, does the government stand behind it? And it turns out, by the way, you just went so nerdy. I feel good about my level of nerdiness. But that was what happened in 2008, which is we made mutual funds whole. If we're not willing to let crypto pirates lose money, then we're the ones who end up bearing it, and then that's systemic. If we are, I don't mind letting a few of them go bust. I don't mind letting all of them go bust. They went to the casino. They knew it was a casino. But we have to make sure that the administration responds that way.
Well, I guess we're going to see how much backing we provide in the coming months. Justin Wolfers, professor economics and public policy, University of Michigan, and late for therapy. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.